Karen refuses to let EMTs into building, says the siren was too loud. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The sun was just beginning to set over the downtown skyline, casting long shadows through the narrow streets lined with towering apartment complexes that housed a bustling mix of residents. Young professionals rushing home from work, families settling in for the evening, and the elderly quietly watching the world go by from their windows. In one such building, a sudden emergency was unfolding. A neighbor was experiencing a medical crisis that demanded immediate attention. The shrill wail of ambulance sirens pierced the usual evening calm, echoing off the concrete and glass of the city as paramedics sped toward the apartment complex with practiced urgency. The flashing red and white lights danced across the surrounding buildings, reflecting in the eyes of curious onlookers and alerting everyone nearby that something serious was happening. The team of EMTs moved swiftly, their gear strapped securely and their faces set with focused determination as they approached the entrance of the building, ready to respond to the call for help that could mean the difference between life and death. However, as the paramedics reached the lobby entrance, their sense of urgency met an unexpected obstacle in the form of Karen, a resident known in the building for her persistent complaints and overbearing demeanor. Karen stood firmly in front of the entrance doors, her arms crossed tightly across her chest and her face etched with unmistakable annoyance. As the ambulance sirens blared loudly just moments before, she had hurried out of her apartment, not with concern or readiness to help, but with irritation clouding her expression. Without any hesitation, she positioned herself deliberately to block the EMT's path, planting her feet firmly and refusing to budge despite their polite but insistent requests to let them pass. Her voice cut through the hum of the city and the distant murmurs of residents returning home, loud and sharp as she explained that the siren had been too loud, startling her beloved cat and disrupting the peace she demanded in her home. To her, the urgency of a neighbor's medical emergency paled in comparison to the discomfort she believed the siren had caused. The paramedics, trained to remain calm even in the face of unexpected resistance, explained gently but firmly that they needed immediate access to the building to reach a neighbor in dire need of medical assistance. Their voices carried a professional tone underscored with urgency as they emphasized the life-or-death nature of their mission. They reminded Karen that the siren was a necessary signal to ensure they could navigate traffic safely and swiftly, and that every second counted when responding to emergencies. Yet Karen remained unmoved, her gaze cold and unyielding as she reiterated her complaints, declaring that she would not allow them inside until the noise was addressed. She insisted that her rights as a resident to peace and quiet were being violated, ignoring the escalating tension that her obstinance was causing. The EMTs exchanged quick glances, weighing their options and trying to think through the best course of action while the precious minutes ticked by. Around them, the atmosphere in the lobby began to shift as other residents took notice of the standoff. The building's security cameras, mounted discreetly in the corners, silently recorded every moment of the unfolding drama, capturing Karen's defiant posture and the paramedics' respectful but urgent requests. Neighbors emerged from their apartments or paused in the hallways, drawn by the raised voices and the flashing lights outside. Some residents looked on with frustration, shaking their heads at Karen's selfish refusal to let the EMTs do their job, while others were visibly confused or hesitant, unsure how to intervene or what the appropriate response should be. A few murmured among themselves about the importance of letting emergency services do their work, reminding one another of the fragility of life and the necessity of cooperation during crises. The tension in the building was tangible, the air thick with a mixture of concern, disbelief, and growing impatience. Karen, seemingly oblivious to the mounting frustration around her, continued to voice her grievances loudly, insisting that the siren's noise had frightened her cat, who was known to be skittish and prone to anxiety. She claimed that this disturbance was intolerable and that the paramedics should have found a quieter way to approach without disrupting the peace of the building's residents. Her complaints took on a petulant tone, and she crossed her arms more tightly, planting herself more firmly in the entranceway as if to physically embody her resistance. Her words echoed through the lobby, unsettling some of the other residents who had been momentarily distracted from their own evening routines. Some visitors paused at the building's entrance, eyebrows raised in surprise at the sight of a woman blocking emergency responders, while others took out their phones, beginning to record the scene with growing concern. The paramedics, fully aware that time was critical, attempted to find alternative ways to gain access, calling the building's management and security team to intervene. Their radios crackled softly as they coordinated efforts, explaining the urgent need to get inside and reach the neighbor in distress. Building staff responded promptly, arriving within minutes and assessing the situation with professionalism and calm authority. They attempted to reason with Karen, explaining the gravity of the emergency and reminding her of the legal obligations residents have to allow emergency personnel access. They emphasized the potential consequences of obstructing such responders, both in terms of safety and legal liability. Despite these efforts, Karen remained steadfast, her voice rising in frustration and indignation as she doubled down on her refusal, arguing that no one had the right to disturb her peace, no matter the circumstances. The arrival of building security heightened the seriousness of the standoff. Security officers approached Karen with measured firmness, reiterating the necessity of cooperation in emergency situations and the potential ramifications if she continued to block the entrance. They explained the importance of prioritizing human life over temporary discomfort and appealed to her sense of community responsibility. Security staff reminded Karen that preventing EMTs from entering could lead to legal consequences, including fines or eviction, and they urged her to reconsider her position for the sake of her neighbor's safety. Karen, however, met these warnings with obstinate resistance, her protests growing louder as she accused the staff of overreach and insisted that her cat's well-being was being ignored. The confrontation became increasingly tense, with voices raised and neighbors watching anxiously as the situation teetered on the edge of escalation. Throughout the ordeal, the paramedics remained composed, focused on finding a resolution that would allow them to do their job while minimizing conflict. They reassured the crowd that the sirens were only as loud as necessary and that every effort was made to limit disruption without compromising emergency response times. Their professionalism and calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Karen's escalating defiance, drawing quiet respect from many onlookers who recognized the gravity of the situation. Despite the delay, they prepared their equipment and mentally rehearsed the steps needed to stabilize the patient once access was granted, knowing that every moment counted and that the safety of their neighbor hung in the balance. The tension in the lobby seemed to stretch endlessly as negotiations and pleas continued, with Karen standing as a stubborn barrier between life-saving aid and a neighbor in need. The residents around the lobby grew restless, some voicing support for the EMTs and urging Karen to move, while others attempted to calm the situation, appealing to Karen's better judgment. The recorded footage from the security cameras captured the entire event, a silent witness to a moment that would soon ripple beyond the walls of the apartment complex. The building's reputation and the sense of community were tested as residents grappled with the selfishness of one individual versus the collective responsibility to protect and support each other in times of crisis. Finally, after what felt like an eternity to those involved, building security gently but firmly guided Karen aside, reminding her once more of the serious implications of her actions and the urgent need to prioritize the neighbor's well-being. Reluctantly and muttering complaints under her breath, Karen stepped away from the entrance, allowing the paramedics to rush inside with their equipment and determination. The doors swung open, and the EMT team moved swiftly through the lobby, their footsteps echoing as they made their way to the apartment of the person in distress. Neighbors watched with a mixture of relief and concern, hoping for a positive outcome and grateful that the obstruction had finally been resolved. As the paramedics disappeared into the hallway, the lobby slowly began to regain its normal rhythm, though the echoes of the confrontation lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. Conversations buzzed with a mixture of frustration, disbelief, and reflection on the importance of cooperation and empathy during emergencies. The event, though traumatic and unsettling, became a powerful reminder of the fragile balance between individual comfort and community responsibility. It underscored the vital role that emergency responders play in safeguarding lives and the necessity of supporting them without hesitation or obstruction. The scene closed with neighbors resuming their routines, some checking in on one another with newfound awareness of how quickly ordinary life could be interrupted and how critical it was to stand united when faced with crises beyond individual concerns. The tension in the apartment complex's lobby did not dissipate immediately after Karen's initial refusal to let the EMTs enter, and what followed was a slow, grinding escalation of frustration, confusion, and conflict that enveloped everyone present in an uncomfortable atmosphere. The paramedics, whose job depended on swift and unobstructed access to those in need, found themselves caught in a standoff that threatened not only the life of a neighbor but also the delicate social fabric of the building's community. Their voices remained calm and professional, attempting to reason with Karen and explain the dire urgency of the situation, but her responses were stubbornly dismissive, tinged with entitlement and a refusal to see beyond her own narrow perspective. The sirens, still audible just outside, had become a symbol not of emergency but of irritation to her, and she insisted that the noise had not only startled her cat but had invaded her personal sanctuary, a sanctuary she was unwilling to sacrifice, even for a life potentially hanging in the balance. Around them, the dynamics of the gathering shifted as other residents began to weigh in on the situation, some voicing growing impatience with Karen's obstinacy, while others hesitated, unsure how to navigate the conflict unfolding in their shared space. Several neighbors emerged from their apartments, drawn by the commotion, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, concern, and disapproval. Many understood the seriousness of the emergency and sympathized with the paramedics' plight, but the building's social cohesion now faced a test. Some residents confronted Karen directly, urging her to consider the consequences of her actions and to step aside for the good of their community. Others called for patience and calm, mindful that emotions ran high on all sides and that escalation could only worsen the situation. The air in the lobby became charged, thick with a mix of frustration, anxiety, and a palpable desire for resolution that seemed frustratingly elusive. Meanwhile, Karen stood her ground like a fortress, unwavering in her determination to block the EMT's path. She repeated her complaints with increasing vehemence, her voice rising into a crescendo that reverberated against the high ceilings and polished walls. She spoke of her cat's trauma, her need for peace, and the injustice of being forced to endure the loud siren that had shattered the calm of her home. Her words were laced with an almost theatrical sense of grievance, as if the entire building owed her accommodation in light of her pet's discomfort. This self-centered focus on her own disruption, despite the life-threatening emergency unfolding just beyond the lobby doors, ignited waves of anger among many onlookers. Voices rose in counterpoint, with residents expressing outrage at the apparent lack of empathy and the prioritization of personal comfort over human life. Tensions rose palpably as neighbors took sides, the building's usual sense of community fraying in the face of conflicting emotions and values. The paramedics remained professional and persistent, employing every tactic at their disposal to de-escalate the conflict and gain access. They explained repeatedly, with patience that belied the urgency of their mission, that every second counted when responding to medical emergencies and that their presence was essential to save a neighbor's life. They appealed not only to Karen's sense of community but also to legal and moral obligations that mandated cooperation with emergency personnel. Despite these earnest efforts, Karen dismissed the pleas with a wave of her hand, accusing the EMTs of insensitivity and suggesting that alternative, quieter methods could have been employed. Her unwillingness to budge demonstrated a profound disconnect between her perception of inconvenience and the reality of a life at risk. This impasse underscored the challenges faced by emergency responders when confronted with resistance fueled by fear, entitlement, or misunderstanding. Amid the growing discord, the building's management was alerted and swiftly responded to the escalating crisis. Building supervisors and security personnel arrived on the scene, bringing with them an authoritative presence and a mandate to restore order. They joined the paramedics in appealing to Karen's sense of reason and responsibility, reminding her of the legal implications of obstructing emergency services and the potential consequences for the safety of all residents. The management team emphasized that the siren, while disruptive, was a necessary and regulated component of emergency response protocols designed to ensure rapid assistance in critical situations. They further reminded residents that individual discomfort could not override the collective need to protect life and that cooperation was a cornerstone of community living. The presence of management added weight to the pleas for compliance, signaling that the standoff could not continue indefinitely without repercussions. Despite the mounting pressure and the clear authority of the security personnel, Karen's defiance persisted. She raised her voice, repeating her grievances with renewed fervor and accusing the building staff of being indifferent to her well-being and the well-being of her cat. Her refusal to yield created a visible rift in the crowd, with some residents expressing dismay at the disruption while others whispered about the need to respect individual rights and concerns. The security team faced a delicate balancing act, enforcing the rules and ensuring emergency access while avoiding unnecessary escalation that could endanger anyone present. They began to outline the steps they would take if Karen continued to obstruct the EMTs, including the possibility of forcibly removing her and involving law enforcement if necessary. This warning marked a turning point, emphasizing the seriousness with which the building treated the obstruction of emergency services. Throughout this ordeal, the security cameras mounted discreetly in the lobby continued to record every exchange, capturing the standoff in detail. These recordings would later serve as vital evidence in resolving disputes and reinforcing the importance of compliance with emergency protocols. The knowledge that the encounter was being documented added a layer of accountability, reminding all parties that their actions carried consequences beyond the immediate moment. Some residents quietly observed the cameras, finding comfort in the transparency and fairness that such surveillance could provide, while others reflected on the broader implications of privacy and community responsibility in shared living spaces. After what felt like an agonizingly long period of negotiation and confrontation, Karen finally relented. Perhaps swayed by the combined authority of the paramedics, security, and management, or by a dawning realization of the gravity of her obstruction, she stepped aside with a visible display of reluctance and muttered complaints about the noise and disturbance. Her body language conveyed resistance even as she moved, her words trailing off into the background as the path to the building's interior was finally cleared. The paramedics wasted no time, swiftly entering the building with their equipment and focused determination. Residents collectively exhaled, the tension in the lobby easing as the critical barrier was removed and emergency aid could proceed unimpeded. As the EMTs navigated the hallways toward the apartment of the individual in distress, the residents remained clustered in the lobby, many still shaken by the confrontation but hopeful for a positive outcome. Conversations resumed, filled with a mixture of relief, reflection, and lingering frustration. Neighbors shared their thoughts about the importance of supporting emergency responders and the responsibilities that come with communal living. Some expressed sympathy for Karen's concerns about her pet, but a majority emphasized that emergencies required swift, collective action and that personal inconvenience must sometimes be set aside in the interest of safety and compassion. The event had become a teachable moment, a vivid example of the tensions that can arise when individual needs clash with urgent community responsibilities. While the paramedics continued their work inside, the building's management reviewed the security footage to fully understand the scope of the incident and to determine appropriate next steps. They prepared to communicate with all residents about the importance of cooperation during emergencies and to remind them of the protocols designed to protect everyone. Plans were made to hold informational sessions to educate residents on emergency procedures and to foster a greater sense of communal responsibility. The hope was to prevent similar incidents in the future and to strengthen the bonds of trust and respect within the apartment complex. The building's leadership recognized that while such conflicts were rare, their impact was significant and demanded a proactive, thoughtful response. In the quiet moments following the resolution of the standoff, the community began to process what had occurred. The incident served as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the critical role that empathy and cooperation play in ensuring the safety and well-being of all residents. It highlighted the challenges of balancing personal comfort with collective needs and underscored the importance of communication, understanding, and respect in navigating shared living spaces. As the evening settled and residents returned to their routines, many carried with them a renewed awareness of the responsibilities inherent in community life and a commitment to support one another, especially in times of crisis. Ultimately, the confrontation in the apartment lobby was more than just a moment of conflict. It was a catalyst for growth, dialogue, and strengthened community bonds. The experience left an indelible mark on those who witnessed it, shaping attitudes and inspiring a collective resolve to prioritize life, compassion, and cooperation above all else. And while the echoes of that tense evening would linger, the hope remained that it would pave the way for a safer, kinder, and more understanding environment for all who called the complex home. The arrival of building security marked a crucial turning point in the tense standoff that had gripped the apartment complex lobby. bringing with it an aura of authority and an unambiguous reminder that the obstruction of emergency responders was a matter of serious consequence. The security officers approached with calm yet assertive demeanors, their presence immediately commanding attention and signaling to Karen that her continued defiance would no longer be tolerated without repercussions. They began by addressing Karen respectfully but firmly, explaining the critical importance of allowing EMTs unobstructed access to the building, not just as a matter of policy but as a moral imperative that could mean the difference between life and death. The officers reminded her that emergency responders are protected under local and national laws which require residents and bystanders to cooperate fully during medical emergencies, emphasizing that obstruction could result in legal penalties or even eviction from the building. Karen, however, remained obstinate, her voice rising with indignation as she doubled down on her complaints, insisting that her rights, and those of her cat, had been severely violated by the noise and disruption caused by the ambulance sirens. As the officers calmly but persistently urged Karen to reconsider, a growing crowd of residents gathered in the lobby, their faces a mixture of frustration, concern, and anticipation. Many whispered among themselves, condemning Karen's selfish behavior while expressing empathy for the paramedics whose crucial work was being delayed. Some residents offered words of support to the security team, encouraging a firm approach, while others simply observed in stunned silence, absorbing the gravity of the confrontation unfolding in what was usually a quiet, everyday space. The presence of security cameras in the lobby meant that the entire exchange was being recorded, adding a layer of accountability that underscored the seriousness of Karen's actions. This knowledge seemed to embolden the security officers, who maintained their professionalism while preparing to take the necessary steps to clear the path for the EMTs. Despite the mounting pressure, Karen's refusal to move remained steadfast and vocal. She argued loudly that the paramedics' sirens were unnecessary and excessively loud, causing undue distress not only to her but potentially to other residents as well. She claimed that alternative methods of alerting the building could have been employed, and she accused the staff and paramedics of insensitivity and disregard for the well-being of her pet and the building's peace. Her tone was accusatory, painting herself as a victim of systemic disregard, while dismissing the urgent medical crisis that lay just beyond the lobby doors. This display of self-importance and disregard for communal welfare inflamed the crowd further, with several residents stepping forward to voice their disapproval and to call on Karen to act responsibly and with empathy. The tension escalated, creating a palpable divide within the gathering that tested the community's cohesion and values. In response to Karen's continued resistance, security officers began outlining the procedures they would follow if she refused to cooperate, including the possibility of physically escorting her from the premises and contacting local law enforcement if necessary. They explained that such measures were not taken lightly but were essential to protect the health and safety of all residents. These warnings were delivered with calm authority, designed to de-escalate the situation by providing clear information about consequences rather than threatening or antagonizing. Karen's demeanor shifted only slightly, her defiance tempered by the realization that her actions had serious implications, but her protests did not cease entirely. She muttered complaints about being targeted and infringed upon, though she eventually stepped back enough to allow the paramedics access, albeit reluctantly and with visible resentment. With the obstruction finally removed, the EMT team moved swiftly into the building, their professionalism and focus a stark contrast to the earlier conflict. They navigated the hallways with practiced efficiency, communicating through radios and assessing their environment as they proceeded to the apartment of the neighbor in distress. The residents in the lobby watched anxiously, many expressing relief that the paramedics could now perform their critical work without hindrance. The collective mood, once fraught with tension and division, began to soften as the community's shared concern for the well-being of the individual in need took precedence over the earlier discord. Conversations resumed with renewed civility, and a sense of solidarity started to rebuild among neighbors who had witnessed the fraught episode. As the paramedics administered care and prepared the patient for transport, building management convened to review the incident in detail. They examined the security footage to understand the timeline and nature of the obstruction and to gather evidence for any necessary follow-up actions. The management team was unanimous in condemning the behavior that had delayed emergency response and endangered a resident's life. They also recognized the need to balance enforcement with education, understanding that fear and misunderstanding could sometimes underlie such disruptions. Plans were set in motion to implement educational programs aimed at increasing residents' awareness of emergency protocols, the role of first responders, and the importance of cooperation in crisis situations. These initiatives were designed not only to prevent future incidents but also to foster a culture of empathy and responsibility within the community. Residents took the opportunity to discuss the event among themselves, reflecting on what they had witnessed and the lessons it imparted. Many expressed anger and disappointment at Karen's actions, seeing them as selfish and dangerous. They praised the paramedics for their calm professionalism and the security team for their measured handling of a difficult situation. Some residents shared stories of their own experiences with emergencies, emphasizing how critical quick access and cooperation are when lives are on the line. These conversations helped to heal the rift caused by the confrontation, reinforcing a shared commitment to look out for one another and to uphold the community's safety. The incident became a catalyst for strengthening neighborly bonds, reminding everyone that living together in an urban environment requires both individual consideration and collective responsibility. Meanwhile, the aftermath of the incident prompted discussions about how to support vulnerable residents, including those with pets or specific needs that might be impacted by emergency responses. Suggestions included creating quiet zones, advanced notifications where possible, and better communication between building management and residents about emergency procedures. The goal was to balance the necessity of urgent medical care with sensitivity toward residents' comfort and safety. These discussions underscored the complexity of managing emergencies in shared living spaces but also highlighted the community's willingness to engage constructively with challenges. The dialogue demonstrated that while conflicts may arise, they can also lead to meaningful improvements when approached with openness and cooperation. Karen herself faced potential consequences for her obstruction. Building management and security reviewed the incident with a view toward enforcing community guidelines and policies that protect emergency access. They communicated with Karen about the seriousness of her actions, emphasizing the potential legal liabilities and risks posed by blocking first responders. While Karen remained unapologetic in private conversations, the official response included warnings and, if necessary, steps toward further disciplinary measures to ensure that such behavior would not be repeated. The situation served as a reminder to all residents that individual actions have broader implications for community safety and that living in a shared environment entails responsibilities that sometimes require sacrifice of personal convenience for the greater good. As the emergency resolved and the neighborhood settled back into its usual rhythm, the incident remained a vivid memory and a topic of ongoing conversation. The apartment complex community emerged with a renewed appreciation for the critical work of EMTs and emergency personnel and a strengthened resolve to support their efforts. The story of Karen's refusal to let EMTs in due to the siren noise became a cautionary tale underscoring the importance of empathy, cooperation, and respect during emergencies. It highlighted how even well-intentioned concerns, when expressed without consideration for urgent realities, can escalate into dangerous obstructions. The residents' collective response reflected the values of compassion and responsibility that underpin healthy, safe communities. Ultimately, the events that transpired in the lobby served as a powerful lesson in the necessity of balancing individual rights with community needs, especially in moments of crisis. They reaffirmed the critical role that emergency responders play in saving lives and the vital importance of ensuring their unimpeded access. The incident also demonstrated the challenges that can arise in dense urban living spaces, where personal comfort and public safety must be carefully negotiated. Through dialogue, education, and mutual respect, the community took steps to heal and grow stronger, turning a moment of conflict into an opportunity for connection and collective resilience. The story concluded with a hopeful outlook, emphasizing that in times of emergency, unity and cooperation are not just ideals but life-saving necessities. In the days that followed the unsettling standoff in the apartment complex lobby, the echoes of the event continued to reverberate throughout the community, prompting reflection, dialogue, and a renewed commitment to the principles of safety, respect, and collective responsibility. The management team took swift and deliberate action, sharing with all residents a comprehensive statement that not only condemned the obstruction of emergency services but also highlighted the critical importance of cooperation during crises. This communication was crafted with care and sensitivity, acknowledging the discomfort that sirens and emergency responses can cause, especially for residents with pets or special needs, while firmly emphasizing that such discomfort must never take precedence over the urgent need to preserve human life. The message called upon the community to unite in support of emergency responders and to foster a culture where swift assistance is never hindered by individual resistance or misunderstanding. Beyond the official statement, the incident inspired a series of educational initiatives designed to deepen residents' understanding of emergency protocols and to build bridges of empathy within the diverse population of the complex. Workshops were organized featuring local paramedics and fire department personnel who offered first-hand insights into the challenges and realities of emergency response. These sessions provided a platform for residents to ask questions, express concerns, and engage directly with the people dedicated to safeguarding their health and safety. The open dialogue helped demystify the processes behind siren use, rapid response, and patient care, transforming fear and confusion into respect and cooperation. Special attention was given to addressing the needs of residents with pets, including guidance on how to prepare and protect animals during emergencies, recognizing that such considerations were integral to fostering a compassionate and inclusive community. The response of the apartment complex's residents to these efforts was overwhelmingly positive, reflecting a collective desire to learn from the experience and to ensure that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Community meetings became forums for sharing personal stories, expressing hopes for stronger neighborly bonds, and discussing ways to improve communication and support systems. Some residents who had initially been hesitant or confused about the paramedics' urgency expressed gratitude for the clarity and reassurance provided by the educational programs. Others volunteered to serve as liaisons or advocates within the building, helping to disseminate information and to encourage respectful cooperation among neighbors. The incident thus became a catalyst for greater civic engagement and a testament to the power of shared challenges to strengthen community ties. Meanwhile, Ethan, the paramedic team's neighbor who had been the subject of the emergency response, made a remarkable recovery, thanks in no small part to the rapid intervention that had been momentarily delayed but ultimately delivered with skill and care. Once stable, Ethan expressed profound gratitude toward the EMTs and the building staff for their dedication and professionalism. His heartfelt thanks extended beyond those directly involved to the wider community, acknowledging the collective effort that had ensured his safety and recovery. Ethan's story was shared in newsletters and local forums, serving as a poignant reminder of the preciousness of life and the vital importance of unimpeded emergency access. His experience inspired renewed respect for first responders and reinforced the lessons learned from the confrontation in the lobby. The community also took time to reflect on the individual whose actions had caused the obstruction. While Karen's refusal to allow EMT access was widely condemned, many residents and management recognized the complexity behind such behavior. They acknowledged that fear, misunderstanding, and personal anxieties can sometimes drive people to act in ways that are harmful or counterproductive. Efforts were made to engage with Karen in a constructive manner, offering support and education in hopes of fostering greater awareness and empathy. The goal was not simply to punish but to promote healing and to prevent future incidents through understanding and communication. This approach underscored the community's commitment to inclusivity and its belief in the capacity for growth and change even in the face of conflict. As the weeks turned into months, the apartment complex began to heal from the disruption, its residents united by the lessons learned and the bonds forged through shared experience. Emergency preparedness became a central theme in community activities, with regular drills, informational campaigns, and support networks established to ensure that all residents were equipped to respond effectively in future crises. The building's leadership continued to prioritize open communication, transparency, and resident engagement, fostering a sense of trust and mutual respect that had been tested but ultimately strengthened. The atmosphere within the complex shifted toward one of vigilance balanced with compassion, where the safety and well-being of every individual were held as a collective responsibility. The story of the Siren standoff and Karen's refusal to let EMTs enter became part of the building's shared narrative, A cautionary tale told not with bitterness but as a reminder of the values that define a community. It was recounted during welcome sessions for new residents, featured in newsletters, and referenced in conversations that highlighted the importance of empathy, cooperation, and respect for emergency personnel. The incident had left an indelible mark, shaping attitudes and policies in ways that ensured the complex was better prepared and more united. Through this shared history, the residents found a renewed sense of purpose and connection, grounded in the understanding that their collective actions could protect and nurture the fragile thread of life that bound them together. In the quiet moments that followed, as the building returned to its usual rhythms and the city's lights twinkled against the night sky, there was a profound sense of gratitude for the dedication of the paramedics who had persevered despite obstacles and for the resilience of the community that had come together in the face of adversity. The episode, though fraught with conflict and challenge, ultimately illuminated the enduring strength of human kindness and the essential role of cooperation in safeguarding one another. It served as a powerful reminder that emergencies demand not only skill and speed but also trust and unity. The residents, having witnessed firsthand the consequences of obstruction and the power of collective responsibility, embraced these truths with renewed commitment. At its core, the story concluded with the affirmation that living in community requires balancing individual needs with shared welfare, that respect for emergency responders is a vital expression of that balance, and that empathy must guide actions, especially when fear threatens to divide. The experience became a foundation for ongoing growth, education, and solidarity, a beacon for future generations who would call the apartment complex home. Through dialogue, learning, and mutual support, the residents transformed a moment of crisis into a lasting testament to the resilience and compassion that defined the best of communal life. As the building settled into peaceful quiet and the stars shone overhead, the promise of safety, understanding, and cooperation illuminated the way forward, ensuring that help would never again be hindered at the door.